How's it going, Bad Things family? We hope you've been enjoying some recent investments we've made to improve both audio and video here on the channel. Please let us know how we're doing because even if human history doesn't keep improving, we want to get better and better here at Bad Things in History. Now, on with the show. If you listen to the radio or watch television in the United States today, it is quite common to be assaulted with advertisements about new drugs that can treat whatever ails you. Although these advertisements can be misleading at times, the remedies being offered have at least undergone extensive testing before being sold to the public. Even in the early 20th century, there were laws in place to protect public safety, but enforcement of these rules was very inconsistent. And because of that, some people became quite wealthy while selling completely worthless cures. Norman G. Baker is perhaps the most successful fraud of this era. He was an entrepreneur, inventor, and broadcaster who exploited the power of mass media to spread his ideas and, most notably, enrich himself. Baker's first success was in the early 1900s with the invention of the calliophone. This was based on an earlier steam-powered instrument similar to an organ, which was popular on riverboats and at circuses. Baker managed to create a portable version of the instrument. He sold this through the Tangley Company and actually made a decent profit. It might have been the last time Norman Baker earned a living in a manner that was not morally corrupt. Around 1904, Baker became enamored with traveling vaudeville acts who had mentalists as part of their performance. Mentalists at the time very often used tricks to convince the audience that psychic abilities were being used, which was, of course, quite profitable. Baker was accordingly inspired to set up his own traveling show and spent many years separating audience members from their hard-earned cash. In 1924, Baker began to realize the potential of radio broadcasting. He requested a permit from the town of Muscatine, Iowa. The permit was granted and the station launched in 1925 with the call sign KTNT. Supposedly, the call sign was short for Know the Naked Truth. The years that Norman Baker spent as a carnival salesman turned out to be great training for a career in radio. He began broadcasting his radio show in November 1925. Almost immediately, Baker began inciting hatred against a targeted list of enemies. At first, he complained daily about a cartel of broadcasters that were trying to take down independent stations. In the 1920s, radio frequencies were unregulated and news stations quite often interfered with existing ones. So Baker's conspiracy theory was utterly untrue. In 1925, Baker became president of a lobbying group called the American Broadcasters Association, which existed to fight monopolists. He specifically attacked AT&T with this platform, who was the sole producer of radio station transmitters at the time. This group ceased to exist in 1927 and did not affect AT&T's sales at all. Baker also published TNT Magazine, which was another way to carry the ramblings of his radio show into new markets. He later became president of the Progressive Publishing Company, which published a newspaper called the Midwest Free Press. Norman Baker did this to try and take business away from the other newspapers that he claimed were in a conspiracy against him. Baker had a very long list of things that he was against. The TNT magazine frequently expressed his views against tuberculosis tests for cattle. He also hated water fluoridation, vaccinations, and believed that aluminum cookware caused half of all cancers. In the late 1920s, Norman Baker became aware of a doctor named Harry Hoxsey in Kansas City who supposedly had a cure for cancer. Never one to be outdone where fraud was concerned, Baker invited Hoxsey to join him in Muscatine. Hoxsey was a medical fraud who claimed to have a cure for cancer, and Baker was all too happy to sell it. With help from Hoxsey, the Baker Institute was opened so that patients could be treated. This very expensive cure consisted of injecting items such as corn silk, watermelon seeds, clover, carbolic acid, and, for the very fortunate, plain water. The first 5 patients that were treated all died. Baker, though, kept claiming the cure was a complete success. While offering this cure via his radio show, Baker also attacked doctors, saying they were educated fools who couldn't help anybody. Predictably, this situation wasn't allowed to go on for long. In 1930, the Journal of the American Medical Association published an editorial accusing Baker of being a fraud. One of the many things that prompted this response was when Baker said that the American Medical Association offered him $1 million to purchase the cure and take it off the market so that patients would have to pay for surgery instead. Baker was nothing if not litigious and responded with a libel lawsuit. As with most of his lawsuits, the result was failure. Another activity Norman Baker enjoyed during this time was having huge outdoor gatherings where patients were cured. This drew tens of thousands of people who were also encouraged to buy other products from Baker's companies. In May 1930, the state of Iowa filed an injunction against Baker, Hoxsey, and others for practicing medicine without a license. The trial began in September 1930 and received national attention. During the trial, Baker and Hoxsey turned on each other over a disagreement concerning division of profits from the clinic. They also sued each other numerous times. Most notably, though, it was discovered that the clinic was making up to $100,000 a month. The money was being put into suitcases and taken away during the night. Baker managed to keep his freedom, but the radio station and clinic were finally shut down in 1931. Norman G. Baker was, if nothing else, a very persistent individual. He ran for governor of Iowa in 1932, but only received a few thousand votes. It probably didn't help that he attacked the newspapers and radio stations that reported on his campaign. By 1933, he had been effectively run out of Iowa. So he moved to Mexico and started again. Baker received permission from the Mexican government to operate his radio station in Nuevo Laredo, called XENT-AM, which was beyond the reach of the U.S. government. He also opened another clinic, which was denounced not just by the American Medical Association, but local doctors in Mexico as well. Each night, the radio broadcast usually included a tirade from Baker. These were usually anti-Semitic and anti-Catholic in nature. Supposedly, he also liked to broadcast live while having sex with his many mistresses. His radio program in Mexico was definitely not family-friendly. In 1937, Baker visited Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and found that the town was experiencing financial hardship. It was a tourist area that suffered due to the Great Depression. Norman Baker attempted to help the economy by purchasing a resort known as the Crescent Hotel. Baker found a new accomplice to help him, Thelma Yount. With her help, he opened a new clinic in the hotel and treated thousands of patients. He also printed brochures that advertised his clinic's healing powers and distributed them widely. Supposedly, Baker's new clinic earned hundreds of thousands of dollars, which were kept in safes known only to Yount and himself. A federal investigation stated that this clinic made $500,000 a year, which would be equivalent to a little more than $9 million today. Arkansas was unable or unwilling to stop Baker, as he had almost single-handedly revived the Eureka Springs economy. He also liked to mail pamphlets to potential customers that advertised the healing properties of the resort. Using the postal system to advertise accomplished what Arkansas could not. The federal government eventually stepped in, hitting Baker with 9 counts of mail fraud in 1939. Despite appeals all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, Norman Baker was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. He served this sentence in Leavenworth from 1941 to 1944. The clinic and radio station were shut down after Baker went to prison. Thelma Yount was appointed head of the radio station in Baker's absence, and she found a way to profit from his misfortune. During World War II, companies were not able to acquire broadcasting equipment within the U.S. because of a wartime freeze. There were no restrictions on buying equipment from Mexico, though. Yount took advantage of this fact and sold the transmitter Baker used to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's son, Elliot, who owned a broadcasting company in Texas. Baker found out what was happening and contacted the President of Mexico to try to stop the transaction. Mexico had a ban on exporting radio equipment, and the president agreed to help Baker. A payment to the communications minister supposedly helped ensure that the trucks carrying the equipment from Mexico departed before legal papers arrived to stop them from leaving, though. After being released from prison, Baker made one more attempt to establish another healing center in Iowa. The state, understandably, refused to grant him permission to do this. Failing in his final scheme to peddle cancer cures, Baker finally retired to Miami, Florida. Norman G. Baker died of cirrhosis on September 10, 1958, on his yacht. Despite a fraud conviction, apparently he still had plenty of money to live lavishly until the day of his passing. Whoever said crime doesn't pay apparently wasn't taking Baker into consideration. Baker was not the only person during the early 20th century to peddle false cures or use mass media to con the masses. He might have been the most successful, though. Unfortunately, he was not the last. What do you think of Norman G. Baker and his eventful life? Please leave a comment and let us know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching Bad Things in History.